Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF, mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify their fitness journey so they can lose weight, regain their confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. And today we have a very special guest. She's a homeschooling or unschooling mom of four and who at age 37, yes, you heard that correct, 37, she took the stage for her first ever bikini competition, which was the first of many that she went on to win. And then 1 year later, she made her first millions as the CEO of the Sculpted Vegan. She has built the Sculpted Vegan, which is her vegan bodybuilding and fitness empire from her kitchen table. And I can vouch for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with 0 followers or connection. And she is the host of the Kim Constable podcast. And she is just a badass. And before, Kim, welcome. This is Kim Constable, my friend, and Kim and I go way back. Kim, I'm going to tell you tell the audience how we met, because I tell everybody that because I thought it was such a interesting way. Do you remember?
I remember. Yes, I do.
Okay, so I had just had Nico. Okay, and Nico had the worst acid reflux on the planet. Like he had all the problems. And Kim reached out to me because she was starting to think about competing. And she reached out to me about coaching posing for her. And I was like, listen, I would love to, but right now I'm trying to survive a baby who will not sleep at all. And then she's like, why? I have 4 kids and I've seen it all. And I'm like, tell me more. And then she's like, my sister has this company that helps with acid reflux. Give me our address. And FYI, I would never give my address to a random person on the internet that got on the phone with me. But actually, Kim's husband used to be my husband's agent when I lived in Northern Ireland. That's kind of how we got to know each other. So next thing I know, Kim is at my door, literally like 3 hours later.
It's true.
With like I think you brought me box of chocolate or something. And then you just sat there and hung out with me for like a couple hours. We were just chatting away and you brought me the baba kush. And that's kind of how we met.
Yeah, it was supposed to be about bodybuilding and posing. And then as soon as you were like, no, I just had this baby and I'm struggling, I was like, I will be there in like 1 hour. Give me your address.
But it was so funny because you're like, oh, my sister, she made this thing. Give me 2 seconds. And somehow you pulled a baba kush out of I don't know where. And then you rock in my house and you're like, okay, I'm going to help you set up. And this is what I'm like, this is what I needed.
For most people, I think it's called interfering. But I was just always like, if somebody was struggling, especially a mom, like, oh my God, like I just remember it so well and how hard it is, especially with you being away from your family and, you know, and not having family over here. You know, I know you have a good network of friends, but I think that women are so isolated today. Whenever they have kids, they just don't have the support that they used to years ago. So I always, anytime anyone has a baby or any of my friends, you know, obviously my friends are too old to be having babies now, but when they were, no. It's not awful. It's now my friends' children are getting married. That's what I said to Ryan the other week. I was like, oh, we were invited to a wedding. Actually, one of the rugby boys was getting married. And it's the first wedding we've been invited to that hasn't been like children of our friends, which is really awful when you get to that age. But anyway, any mum that's struggling, I'm just the first one to be there to say, I know what you're going through. I know how hard it is. And let me see if I can help.
And I actually have 2 more funny stories. I don't know if you're going to remember this. So I had Chloe and we had been friends for that whole time. And I got pregnant right after I had Nico with Chloe. And then you cooked a vegan, which was delicious. It was my first experience with like vegan cuisine. And you dropped off, like you didn't even want to see my face. You just knew that I needed food. You dropped of food in my house, like, which was this big tray. And I was like, listen, Kim, I love you very much. And I appreciate your plant-based vegan living, but I'm going to put some chicken in it.
Do you know, I had completely forgotten about that until just this moment. I literally had forgotten about that. But you're right, I did. I forgot.
You didn't even tell me that you were going to bring. You just told me that he was there.
I
Like,
was like, I'm
hey,
not
open your
staying.
door.
Yeah, here's some food. Just because, like, who wants to bloody cook when you've just had a baby?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
and I think Kim, like, now is starting to transition into, I think what is very important for the conversation today was the day, because I really think that my business is as it is today because of you. And and I've told you this several times, because you opened my eye to, like, a way of working online that I had you was like, my mind was, right after I had Chloe, you invited me to your house with a bottle of champagne, which I got slightly shit faced because I hadn't drank in a long time. And you literally walked me through everything that you were doing from your kitchen table.
I remember that. I remember that now. It's so funny how we forget things so easy,
Yeah.
but I remember it now, you said, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you believed that I could before I believed that I could. And I think that if I could pinpoint the one thing why I believe that you're so successful today. And this is regardless whether I agree with veganism or I don't agree. I don't think that this has any, because I think great minds can differ, but good people are going to be good people regardless of where they are. And I think that the support and the belief in myself that you helped me see is what I think makes you so successful today. Can you tell a little bit of your story on how you went on? Because you were a stay-at-home mom for a long time, homeschooling your kids. And then you were like, okay, I'm done. Fuck this shit. I'm going to build my own empire. Because your husband had a good job. He owned his own business. But what happened?
Do you know, honestly, Nathalia, I actually said this. I was interviewed in Forbes recently, and I said this to the interviewer, and then I was telling Ryan about it afterwards. I was like, and I was laughing, and I said to him, you know what? I just realized one day my husband would never be rich enough for me, and I was just going to have to build my own business. And Ryan was like, yeah, that's a wee bit hurtful, actually. And I was like, really? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I hadn't even thought about it in that way. And then of course, so I was, but it is, if it didn't, I'm saying it now because I know he's never going to listen to this podcast, but which is a terrible thing to say, actually. If it hurts him, I shouldn't say it, but there is a lot of truth in it. It's not that I realized my husband would never be rich enough for me. It was more just, I was really genuinely driven to be successful out of necessity. And I guess I think that, people either move towards pleasure or away from pain. And certainly for me, a lot of it was moving away from pain, because Ryan, whenever we first got together, Ryan, he had been a very successful rugby player, and then he started his own company, which obviously was a sports management company, and he used to be Roger's agent as well. And he was very successful by any normal person's terms, in what he was doing. And we obviously had, 4 kids very quickly. And whenever I was at home with the 4 kids, Ryan was not the kind of husband to give a lot of support. And that's just not how he was brought up. I'm not blaming him. I'm not judging him for it. He unfortunately, because of both of our, I guess, childhood patterns, if you like, of both how we were both raised was that the woman looks after the children and cooks and cleans and does the majority of the childcare, and the man goes out to work. That was the example that was set to me by my parents. And it was certainly the example that was set to Ryan. He was actually born in South Africa. So he was brought up in South Africa he lived there till he was 13. And so in South Africa, it's very much the male is in charge in South Africa.
Yeah.
And then he moved to Australia, and his parents, they struggled a lot for money. His dad worked, but they had 5 kids. His mom never worked, and she stayed at home. And Ryan remembers things like every day he came home from school, there was a cake baked sitting on the counter. That's the kind of mom he had, which is not me. So just FYI.
Same.
Yes. And so,
I digress.
And so I was, so honestly, the reason why I decided one day to be successful, because it wasn't that I realized Ryan would never be rich enough for me. It was more that I realized that if I wanted to be supported, in the way that I really felt like I need to be supported, it was actually never going to come from Ryan. But here's one of the things I want to say. This isn't something that I'm blaming Ryan for, because since I matured and built my company and I'm now the main breadwinner at home, things are very, very different with Ryan. And I know that we were going to discuss this in the podcast, but years ago, I didn't feel like, because of my own limitations, my own fears, whatever it was, my own programming from childhood, I didn't honestly feel that I could say to Ryan, listen, you be home at 5 because I need your help with the kids. No, get up off that fucking sofa and help me because I need this or I need that. I definitely had a very much of a programming of don't want to upset Ryan, don't want to rock don't want to rock the boat, and if he genuinely, and we have literally transformed our marriage and worked through all this now, and he has seriously apologized to me for how he was, because he's very different now. But anytime he ever did anything for me with the kids, whether it be bath them or take them to the park or take them swimming, he acted like he was bestowing an enormous favor on me. And he would be like, oh, I'm going to take the kids.
I am hooking you up here, sis.
Yes, I know. And so he would be like, I would say, please, can you take the kids swimming? Or I want to go to yoga. And so he would say, right, well, you have them ready to go by like 9 a.m. So 4 kids, I had to get them ready and get the bags packed and get the snacks packed and get this. And I literally went so far as to putting them in the bloody car, in the car seat. Ryan got into the car, walked out of the house, got into the driver's seat and drove the children to David Lloyd, took them swimming, drove them back and deposited them with me. Job done. Yeah. That's my fathering for the day. So that was how it was for me when the kids were younger. And I had 4 kids under the age of 6. And genuinely, there were times when I fell to my knees because I was exhausted. I was emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted. And there was actually one time that I literally begged Ryan for help whenever Jack was very, very young. Jack's my 4th child, and I had to stay up late I like to wake them to feed them at around 11 or 11:30. So then I could get a good stretch in the night. And I remember, and I breastfed all my kids, but they all took a bottle as well. And so I remember saying to Ryan, please, will you wake Jack and feed him so I can go to bed at like 8 p.m. and then I can get a good stretch from maybe 8 till 4 before he'll need fed again. And I remember like standing in front of him, I'm not even kidding, crying, actually with tears running down my face, saying, I am so exhausted because I had 4 kids under 6 and I was with them all day, every day. And I said to him, please. And he said, and Ryan, he never even slept in the room with me and the kids after they were born. He stayed in another room until they were sleeping through the night. And again, I allowed this to happen.
Okay, so that's my point. That's what I wanted to say, Kim. Do you think that comes from enabling? Because a lot of times when I see this kind of behavior from men, and I think that now that you're on the other side, would you say that it comes from the woman enabling?
Yes, 100%.
And thinking that the man, it's like incapable, and then it goes on for as long as, if nobody holds me accountable for anything, I'm going to be like, all right, I'm like.
Yeah, 100%. It's not even that I think that it's because I was just going to say I didn't want to make Ryan uncomfortable. It was more just whatever our relationship dynamic was, if somebody doesn't want to do something, or they're not like, of course, I'll do that for you, which is the way I was, I, for some reason, didn't want them to feel like they had to. And I just played that out with Ryan. Whereas now, if I ask Ryan to do something, which never happens, but like if I said to him to do something and he gives me like a shitty attitude, or he gives me a, for fuck's sake, I just go to him, do you have a problem? Is there a problem with this? And he's like, no. I'm like, are you sure? Because it appears that there's a problem given the attitude you just gave me. And he's like, no, there's no problem. I'm just saying, I was like, okay, good. I'm just checking that like you don't actually have a problem with parenting your children. I just got to the stage where I was just like, don't you fucking give me attitude. But it took me actually being successful in my own right to get there. It was so weird how it happened, but that was the driving factor. That's what made me be successful. I was like,
what was the fuck this shit moment for you?
It was, there were 2 of them. And the first one really was, I think, when that moment where I literally fell to my knees and begged him to give Jack a bottle so I could sleep for 8 hours. And he just looked at me and he said, no, I'm sorry, I won't. And it wasn't because he didn't want to help me, Nathalia. It was more that I was a bit of a control freak. And so I would have been like, how many ounces did he have? And, what do you mean? What do you mean he only had 3 ounces? You could have burped him. You could have got more into him. So I would have, tried to control it a bit more rather than just letting it be. And he obviously reacted to that or whatever. So it wasn't genuinely that he wasn't some kind of masochist. He just, never felt like he could do it right. And so he didn't even want to try. And even when his wife was on her knees in front of him, he was like, no, I'm sorry. And he knew I would never hold him accountable to it. So he just went off to bed. And it was in
Yeah.
that moment I realized there is no one coming to save me. No
Yeah.
one. If I want more for my life, I'm going to have to make it happen myself. And that was the pivotal moment. And it was after that I started researching internet companies.
And how long had you been a stay-at-home mom until that point? Because I know that Ryan traveled quite a bit for work as well. So at what point were you, like, when was that?
Corey was born in 2005 and Jack was born in 2011. So 6 years.
So you had been a stay-at-home mom for 6 years,
Yeah.
basically just so, and with that, because it is a big disruption to the status quo. Whenever one day you wake up and you're like, fuck this shit, I off I go. And especially when you have the cultural aspect and the background, what did you find? And again, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that Kim and Ryan have a very solid marriage,
happy marriage, yeah.
and happy marriage. And that's why she's able to talk about these challenges, because what she's telling me here, I am pretty sure that I know that the conversation has happened at home. So I just want to make sure that we all are
and he would be
aware of
okay.
that.
Anything I share here, he would be okay with me sharing.
Yeah. And so what do you find that was the biggest challenge for you? Because, you're treading water and you're swimming against the current when you completely disrupt what the norm is. So what would you say that was the biggest challenge for you in the beginning when you had 4 kids and your husband was used to you baking cake and shit? And then you're like, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think actually it's funny. There was a couple of different challenges. The first one was I am such a perfectionist, if you like, or such a type A overachiever. I was like, I'm going to build this business, but I'm not going to drop one single ball in the house. And I was like, because I honestly didn't want to ever give him the satisfaction of saying, see, you're never here, or you've dropped the ball with the kids, or you're sacrificing this or that or whatever. I never wanted to give him the satisfaction. So in the beginning, the biggest limitation was time. And because I didn't have any time with homeschooling and parenting my 4 kids, I started getting up at 4:30. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. and I was out of bed and at the kitchen table by 4:45 a.m. And I did that for, I would say, a good 4 years probably in the beginning. And I worked from 4:45 a.m. until I heard the first footsteps out of bed, which was dung 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 dung.
I know those very well.
You know those footsteps, and I was like, no.
Even like it sinks, your stomach sinks when you hear it.
I know, because I was like, no, it's not enough time. But that was all the time I had. And so when I sat down at the kitchen table to work on my business, in the beginning, sometimes it was just research and blog writing and just, I had no idea what I was going to do. I genuinely had no idea, but I knew I wasn't going to stop trying to find it. And so I had 2 hours and 15 minutes. I had till 7 a.m. every day. And I did that usually 5 or 6 days a week. I sometimes slept in on the weekend, but I did 5 or 6 days a week. And I just did that consistently for a long time. And I just committed to finding the thing that was going to make me successful. And that was the biggest limitation in the beginning. And then, of course, once I started to be successful or slightly more successful, or I started to put myself out there without actually being successful, that's when all the limitations, that's when all my family started getting like, my mom's like, what are the people in the golf club going to say about my daughter being half naked on Instagram? And then, that all came after.
We're going to get there because I want to talk about that, because as somebody who lived in Northern Ireland, and again, no shade, it's just a different culture, especially because it is a lot smaller. So we're going to get there because I think that you've done a phenomenal job there. So you mentioned that you just went balls to the walls, and whenever you're trying to be perfect at everything, something has to give, as in like your mental health, your well-being, your like what do you find that gave for you? Because there's only so much that you can going balls to the walls like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess probably just the depth of the relationships that I had, I would say, was the thing that had to give. Certainly, my relationship with Ryan wasn't what it is today. I don't think it ever can be, though. Whenever you have 4 fucking toddlers running around the place, it's you're surviving with your husband half the time.
Facts.
So I think probably the depth of my relationships gave, because honestly, I just became a master at time management. And I mean like a master at
Yep.
time management. And I just became super efficient at getting everything done, which is why whenever people say to me, oh, I'd love to, I just don't have the time. I'm like,
It
don't
kills me.
give me that bullshit, because
Yeah.
honestly, where there's a will, there's a way. You may not even know that it's possible, but to say that it isn't is bullshit, because it is possible if you just look for it and you're willing to be uncomfortable, because most people just aren't willing to be uncomfortable. I was
Mm-hmm.
exhausted for I was exhausted for 10 years. Like, I'm not even
Uh-huh.
kidding. I was
Mm-hmm.
exhausted for 10 years, but you just learn to push through, and then you learn
Yep.
to sleep and nap. And like, the
Yep.
amount of times I fell asleep in David Lloyd, which is a gym over here, which I know because you used to go to. I fell asleep in the club room in David Lloyd with like a baby on my chest.
Yep.
Like, and people would have like walked past me and said, oh, whenever you woke up, I watched you napping. It was so cute. And I'm like, yeah, it looks cute to you, but it's kind of just essential to me. There was like, so
It's
you
keeping me
just,
afloat.
yeah, it's keeping me afloat, like literally. Also wine kept me afloat a lot of times as well. Mummy was
We are
much
not
nicer
judging. We
in
are
the
not
witching hour
judging.
with a bottle. Sorry, I mean a glass of wine in her. So you just survival techniques. I think you just do what you can to survive, and that's what I did in the early days.
And whenever it comes to time management, another thing that I learned from you, because for a long time, I was very reluctant to delegate because I thought that I was the best at everything. And then very quickly, I realized that I was good at some things, great at other things, and fucking awful at other things. And I learned from you to kind of like hire out help because you really help. So at what point did you realize that you're like, okay, there are some things here that I can outsource and it's going to keep peace. It's going to keep me, being able to focus on my business and everybody's going to be okay. When did that come?
I think that because I was always really time starved, I always evaluated everything based on, is this worth my time to learn? And if it wasn't worth my time to learn, then I outsourced it. So two reasons, actually. It's a really good question. So there were two things I always had at the forefront of my mind. The first one was when I launched the business, the Sculpted Vegan, which I didn't do, by the way, until 2016. I didn't even get the idea until 2016, even though I started trying to build an online business in 2011. So it took me all those years, 5 years of trying and failing. And so whenever I launched the Sculpted Vegan, I knew that I wanted everything to be super high quality. I knew that I didn't want anyone to look at it and think, oh, this is a business that some stay-at-home mom has started herself. She's done her own design.
Yeah.
I wanted people to look at it and think that it was a professional business, because I was launching with a high ticket item, which was, $1,000. So I knew people weren't going to spend $1,000 unless it looked like it was worth it. So that was always at the forefront of my mind. And so whenever then it came to, I had a bit of experience under my belt. I basically spent 5 years in online business college, right? But there was no
Yeah.
such college existed. I basically taught myself. I taught myself Facebook marketing. I taught myself copywriting. I taught myself, I did courses on Pinterest, anything free. And so I spent 5 years researching online businesses. So by the time it came to launch, I knew what was going to be worth my time and what wasn't. So I did my own Facebook ads in the beginning, but I knew that when it came to design, I knew I was never going to be able to learn to build a website the way that it needed to be professional. And I knew that I was never going to be able to teach myself design or Adobe or Photoshop or anything like that. So that was the first thing that I hired, was a designer, because it was going to take me too long to learn that part of it. But I knew that I could learn everything else because of all the experience I'd had over the last 5 years. So I did all my own copywriting, all my own email marketing, all my own Facebook ads in the beginning. And I hired a designer and web designer. And then I hired a company to do my Facebook ads, because I knew that that would be the thing. Once I'd proven the concept, I knew that hiring a company to do my Facebook ads is the thing that would take it to the next level. And that was my next hire.
And at home, when was it? Because a lot of my followers would be more on the executive setting of like on the work space. I find that a lot of women are trying to do everything at home, and then they're burning the candle on both ends. And normally what ends up suffering is themselves, because they do not have that will to speak up and realize that their needs being met means that everybody's happy.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it, the first thing that you outsourced at home to take that off your plate?
It was, we always had a cleaner. That was one thing that I'd always had over the years, was we had a cleaner who came twice a week, or two girls who came twice a week actually to clean the house. So I was always fortunate in that respect. But I always did all my own laundry and cooking and shopping and all that. So the first hire that I did at home, and again, I realized that if I could hire someone to help me at home, it was going to buy me extra time, and time was the thing that I was most starved of. And so time and money, I guess. And so I hired a housekeeper, Lorraine, who's still with me. And Lorraine started work 3 hours a day, I think it was 5 days a week. So I hired her for 15 hours a week in the beginning. And that was my first hire. And she just went slowly more and more and more and more hours until finally she was full time, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And that bought me an enormous amount of time, because it meant then I didn't have to get up at 4:30 a.m. anymore. I could actually work from 9 until, I think she was there 9 until 1. I think it was 20 hours a week. So 9 until 1 p.m. I could work. And let me tell you, Nathalia, as you know, with young kids, when you have 4 hours to work, you don't waste it.
Oh,
you
no.
don't waste those 4 hours. There's no procrastination. There's no surfing the net. There's no
scrolling the gram. Like you're on. You're getting shit done.
Yes, 100%. So that was the first hire. And then I just kept, I remember speaking to a billionaire years ago, believe it or not. I have a friend who's very, very wealthy who lives in the south of France. And I was at a dinner party at her house once, and there was a guy there who had a company that he had sold for like 2.8 billion, right? And I remember saying to him at the time, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone starting a business who wanted to grow and scale that business, what would it be? Just one. And he said, oh, that's really easy. And I said, well, what is it? He said, aim in your business to do only the things that you can do. In your business, you should only do the things that only you can do, and you should aim to outsource everything else. So he said, basically, you have to replace yourself. You have to replace yourself in every single area. So I always remembered that. And so as I was growing my company, I looked at the different areas and I thought, what are all of the things that I do that other people could do? And so one of them was laundry or cooking and cleaning and, Facebook ad marketing and copywriting and personal assisting me or whatever, all of those tasks. So at the minute in my life and in my business, I only do the things that only I can do. I do nothing else. Everything else is done for me by my team of people. Yeah. And that's how I get so much done.
Yeah. And I think that there is, and kind of now starting on a bit of the social and cultural challenges, because as someone who lived in Northern Ireland, it's a small country that a lot of people don't even realize that it is a country of its own.
Yeah. And it's tiny.
It's very small. And, everybody knows everybody. I remember when I moved to Belfast, like everybody was like, you must be Roger Wilson's fiance, aren't ya? And I'm like, yep, that would be me, because everybody knows everybody. So if somebody that is not from there comes around, they already know 1 + 1 2. And one thing that I realized with the time that I lived there is that there is a lot of limiting belief around outsource. Everybody wants to do everything themselves, and might be because they don't want to spend the money. I don't know why that is. And then in addition to that, there is the challenges of culturally speaking, like you were talking about your mom. What are the people at the golf course going to say, and things like that. And Ryan being well known. I remember seeing Ryan on the TV when Roger was playing. He was doing the commentary, so everybody knew Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
He was the agent for a lot of the players for the biggest rugby team in the country, which was biggest and only. How did you overcome that? And how did you navigate the challenges? And I know that you probably do not give a fuck what people had to say.
No, I did. Yeah.
So can you talk to a little bit more about that, on the people's perception, especially when you are from there?
Yeah, honestly, I think that your why has to be big enough to keep you going, and your vision has to be big enough. I had reached a point where it's not that my life was uncomfortable. It wasn't. Like, we live in a big house. We have, we had a nice, comfortable income. I had 4 beautiful, healthy kids. It was, it's not that my life was hard in any way. It was just emotionally and physically hard because I had so many kids so young. And so I had decided that I wanted to be a multimillionaire. Like, it wasn't even like I want to earn a bit of money. Like, I was very specific that I wanted to, about the kind of life that I wanted to live. And one of my biggest motivators, and this is so important to what I'm going to say next about, to answer your actual question, but Ryan is Australian. My husband's Australian. And so we travel to Australia.
I know that story.
Yeah, every other year. And as we had, and I'd never been to Australia. I always said, I will never go to Australia because it's far too far. And I don't want to sit in an airplane for that long, because hadn't even occurred to me to travel business or first class. And so, of course, then I married an Australian. So what you resist persists, as they say. And so I remember traveling to Australia with Corey, and Ryan was like, "Well, just go straight through. We won't stop over because like you may as well just get there. It's uncomfortable. You just get there." Now, Ryan had done that trip loads of times, but he had never done it with an 8-month-old baby, which was the first time that we did it. And we went all the way through and all the way back. And whenever we go back, I said, "I will never go to Australia again, just so you know. You ever want to go home, you're on your own. I'm not going with you." And it was so uncomfortable. So the next time we went, we had 2 kids. And we had Corey, who was 22 months, and Kai, who I think was 6 months or something. And whatever it was, there's 17 months between them. So you do the math. And but they were young. And again, we did it. Now this time we stopped in a hotel for a short period in the airport. And then we went on through. And again, we got back and I was like, that was hell on earth, Ryan. I will never do that again. And then I kept saying to him, "Can we not fly business class? Is there no way we can make it?" And he was like, "I'm not spending the money on business class." Like we had money, but we didn't have money to burn, certainly not on things like that. And so then we had Maya, and again, we traveled to Australia with 3 kids, and Maya was she was like a baby. And of course, now this is my husband who sat with his earphones on watching movies the whole time. And I would like tap him on the shoulder and go, "Ryan, I need your help." And he'd be like, take his earphones off and turn around and look at me. I'd be like, "Can you stop the fucking movie? I need some help here." Like I spent the entire time. Ryan on the way over managed to watch, I think, 3 movies in a miniseries. I didn't turn the television on once on the entire 36-hour journey. Natalia, it was crazy. And so then we had Jack, and every year we went to Australia, I said, "One day we're going to go business." And Ryan would say, yeah, move on. And then we had Maya, and I remember like looking at business and just thinking, "Oh my God, can you imagine how lovely it would be to fly business?" Yeah. And everyone would be able to sleep. Then whenever we went with Jack, he was 13 months, and whatever age the other kids were, 7, 6, 7, 5, 3, and 13 months. And we got on the plane that time. And I just started training for the bikini competition. I knew I was starting the Sculpted Vegan. I just started the idea, and we got onto the plane and I said to Ryan, next time we fly to Australia, we're going business class. And he was like, yeah, keep moving, sit down. And I think we went one more time, and I said, "Next time we're flying business." And that was one of the things that kept me going. So whenever then, to go back to your original question, whenever I started posting pictures online, and I remember one of the rugby wives, whose name I won't mention, but going to her husband and going, you definitely know who it is, but going to her husband and being like, "Oh, all of the wives are talking about Kim and talking about her on Instagram and talking about her blog." And, and they all started reading it, it's all so insular. Over
I knew
here.
it.
Oh, and everyone started, and so she went to her husband and said, "You need to warn Ryan and tell him that, like this might start affecting his business." So Ryan came to me and was like, "Kim, you need to stop writing your blog and you need to stop posting on Instagram." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because, the wives and girlfriends are starting to talk about you, and if they're talking about you to their husbands, like that might affect, my business." I was like, "How the fuck is that going to affect your business?" And I remember him getting really angry because men are so prideful. And he was just like, "You just need to stop." And I was like, "I'm not fucking stopping." I was like, "Fuck those bitches. Let them say whatever they want." Like I remember thinking,
but FYI,
stay
I'm
in
not
your
bitches.
own lane. No, not you.
I am not bitches.
Not you. It was actually before your time, even before you even came to Northern Ireland. And I remember just being like, that was the first time I was like, shit, people don't want you to succeed in Northern Ireland. They want to talk about you. They want to tear you down. It's tall poppy syndrome. And so Nathalia, what I just kept doing? I just kept thinking, first class flight to Australia, first class flight to Australia, first class flight. And I was like, you bitches will not stop me from getting on that flight to Australia and sitting in first class with my 4 children.
As you pass and you go to coach. Who's
exactly.
the bitch now?
That's it. And so it was that kind of stuff kept me going. It was like being able to go away on amazing vacations and book into suites and, luxury hotels. It was just, I think because my life was so fucking hard with these 4 children. And understand, I know there are people who have a lot harder lives than me. I'm not saying it wasn't, it's some people don't have it tougher. Of course they do. But it was a big enough motivator for me to be able to say, I want out of here. I want my life to be better. No one is going to come and save me. So I'm going to keep the blinkers on, ignore what they're saying, and keep going. And that's what kept me going.
I love that. And I'm going to say this because one thing that I'm seeing a lot is, and I don't say this lightly, is a lot of women without a fucking backbone. That triggers me. And it has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do, with, for me, it's the autonomy piece. Mm-hmm. And this whole messaging out there, oh, you have to be feminine and you have to be submissive. No, like I do not see marriage as like a fucking dictatorship.
No,
It is
no.
a partnership. So you have a lot of women who are stay-at-home moms that they're like, oh, but my husband is the one who makes the money. But like for me, I have personally never been a stay-at-home mom. I always worked. So it's hard for me to relate. But you're doing work at home. It's just
Yeah.
not being like properly compensated. And then you also have the women who do work and do not have the autonomy to make decisions of their own. And they give that power. Like I had a lady recently who husband gave the green light for her to do whatever she wants as far as joining the program. And then he literally told her that he hadn't given her the permission and she had to ask for a refund. So
Ridiculous.
you see what like it's the lack of autonomy for me and the impact that it's having on these women's mental health. So because it is a fight. I understand that, especially when you have society screaming and telling. It's either the extreme that like hairy pits and shit and like feminism and like let blood drop down your pants. We're not there, but also there is the message of the full submission that you just stay home, bake cookies and shit. And I don't think that that is it either. So what would be your message to a woman who finds themselves in a position that you were and that have that uphill battle that you had to change the status quo? What would be your message to somebody like that?
There's two things I would say, right? And one of them probably isn't what you're going to expect. The first thing is that we have to be very careful the narrative that we are teaching to our children, because I think that a lot of the issues that women struggle with their husbands, specifically with men, I don't see it so much in same-sex relationships, but specifically in a mixed sex, heterosexual marriage. I caught myself on a few years ago saying to I don't know when I became aware of it, but I think one of the narratives that we are taught when we are kids, that we inadvertently teach our kids, because sometimes they're being little shits and we want to control them. And so we'll say things like, just you wait till your father gets home.
Yeah.
As a way to threaten them, right? As a way to make them think that, oh, that something, when dad gets home, something bad's going to happen, right? But what you inadvertently do with your kids when you say, wait till your father gets home, is what you're saying to him is, I'm not really in charge around here. Your father is. And so when your father gets home, who's the one in charge, then he's going to deal with this difficult situation. And so you reinforce the message to your kids that the man is in charge. And we do this as well by, like, sometimes, Ryan had all these rules, as men tend to do. I don't know why, around the food. Ryan would have come home and be like, why is he eating that? Or why are they playing with that? And I'd be like, you know what? Fuck you, Ryan. You haven't been at home trying to manage these little brats all day.
Yeah.
So that's why they're eating that, or that's why they're playing with that, or that's why they're watching 7 hours of TV just so I can actually have a break. And so he had all these rules and all these, about the way the kids should be. And so what I found myself one day saying to the kids was, I think I said something like, I only did it once or twice, but I was like, well, let's not tell dad about this. Yeah. I remember Corey saying, why? And I said, well, because I don't think he'd be happy about it. Like, if he asks, we won't lie. But if he doesn't ask, we won't tell him. And I remember thinking, what am I teaching my children by saying this? Like, Ryan's the one with the rules. Ryan's the one with the anger. Ryan's the one in charge. And I used to say to them, why do you never ask your dad for anything? And they say, well, because dad always just says no, or because dad won't give us what we want. And I realized as well, like, they never went to their father for anything, because actually I remember questioning them about it once and saying, why do you never go to dad for anything? And they were like, because dad's kind of scary. And I was like, your father is the fucking least scary person you will ever meet in your life. Like, Ryan has never raised his voice, never gets angry. He's like
the Australian's person that you ever meet.
Totally the most laid back person you'll ever meet. I was the one who's, had like the bad temper and would have, thrown off the handle or whatever. I was the one they should have been scared of. And I realized that inadvertently, I was actually causing my children I was installing, especially in my daughter Maya, the belief that the man is in charge. In a traditional household where there's a husband and a wife and 2 kids, the man is in charge. And I think that we as women have a lot of responsibility for passing that message down to our children, male and female. Because I think then once the little boys grow up, they have the belief, well, the men are in charge, and the women have the belief that the men are in charge, which I think is a lot of what holds all of this together. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when the power dynamic shifted in our house was because Ryan used to, say, like, jokingly, but joke with a jag, I said, well, why do you get to do this and I don't? And he's like, well, whenever you earn the money, you get to, make the rules. And he used to say it as a joke, but people don't joke about things like that. It was actually a belief. So I always had the belief of, great, well, whenever I earn more money than him, then I get to make the rules. And so I remember one day realizing that I was earning 4 times what he was earning, and I had been consistently for maybe a couple of years, but yet Ryan still acted like he was in charge.
Dick swinging.
I used to like put money in our account, like a large 6-figure amount of money in our account to top up our personal account. And then I would look at the account, and Ryan, and like say I would put like 100,000 in our account, right? Ryan would transfer 80,000 of it out into a savings account. And I would be like,
what are you doing?
Where did my money go? And he used to go, oh, I put it into a savings account. Well, what gave you the right to touch my money? He's like, well, it's our money. I'm like, no, understand, dickhead, it's my money. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, but it's better in a savings account. I'm like, I understand, Ryan, but that's my money that I earned. You don't get to move. I'm not saying it isn't a good idea to put it into savings account, but you don't get to do that without consulting me first. I'm not even saying asking permission, but you don't get to do it without consulting me. And it happened so frequently that we actually had we had to have a real come to Jesus moment in our marriage, because we both realized he couldn't even see it when I brought it up with him. He was like, but it makes sense to put it into savings. Like, I don't understand why this is even an issue. This is my job, is to take care of the family financially. And I was like, what if it's not, Ryan? What if it's not? What if it's your job to be my partner? And this is the problem that we've always had. Honestly, Nathalia, I believe that when I was earning more money than Ryan, the tables would turn, and they didn't. And the reason they didn't is because it wasn't money that was holding the whole thing together. It was an culturally ingrained issue that I had brought up with, that Ryan had been brought up with, and he continued to play it out in our family. Now, I obviously did too, continue to play it out in our family, until I reached the point where I was like, I am not only earning the money, I'm still not looking after the kids, because I have a housekeeper and I have a chef and I have a team of people.
But being
I was
the
still
primary
being the one who was managing the people who were managing the kids, and being the one who was managing the house, who were people in the house who were managing the house. So I was not only managing my business and managing the house and managing the kids, I was also earning all the money. And I went to him one day and I was like, I'm doing my job and yours. I've taken over your job without asking you to take over one single part of my job. I haven't asked you to do the childcare, the cooking, the cleaning. I've asked you to do nothing. And he then had a moment of, holy shit, you're right. Yeah. But it really took for me to get to that point of financial freedom, for me to realize that the issue wasn't the money, or wasn't the freedom, or wasn't the house care, or the childcare, or the housekeeping. The issue was the beliefs that we were both holding together in our marriage. So if I can give advice to any of your women watching this who are going through a similar issue, you need to have the difficult conversations with your husband, and you have to understand these are ingrained beliefs. But one thing I have learned, and I know that you know this because you're so different than me anyway, but one thing I have learned is that when you challenge men, they back down. All men, they back down. So, now whenever Ryan's shitty with me about something, I'll say to him, what's the problem? And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, what's the problem? You're giving me a shitty attitude. He's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, Ryan, you fucking are. So stop pretending that you're not, and just tell me what the problem is. Yeah. And then you know what he does? He tells me what the problem is.
Clear communication, but I think you're very good with communication. And this is going to be a two-folded question. I think that because you mentioned that you have become the breadwinner in your house, and then from a societal standpoint, there is the idea, because Ryan owns the rugby agents and he works with the rugby boys and he was a rugby player. And that perception that you're the quote unquote trophy wife. And listen, I ain't got no problem with being a fucking trophy wife. All about it. No. But because that's something that I get sometimes as well. People are like, oh, it's very easy for you to say because your husband was a former professional athlete. And I'm like, cute. I have my accolades of my own too. You know what I mean?
I was like a former professional athlete as well.
Yeah, I've won the biggest bodybuilding competition in the world. So cry me a fucking river. So how do you navigate this? And probably you do not give a shit, but how has it been for you to navigate that? Well, this lifestyle is funded by the rugby man, and now we know that it's not. So how does that play out on your relationship?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's funny, right? And I have thought about this recently, and I'll tell you why I've thought about it, because it happened quite recently and I realized how much I've changed. We were at a Rolex dinner. Brian has got an interest in Rolexes now, so he buys loads of Rolexes. And so every year, Rolex now invite us to their inaugural dinner, right? And it's just like a big evening where you're entertained and
Oh,
fed
you were wearing the black
champagne.
dress.
Yes, the
Oh,
black
that
dress.
dress is hot
Yes.
as hell. Anyway, I
It is
digress.
good. And so we were there this year, and last year, whenever we went, exactly the same thing happened. So because it's a dinner where most people who are there are very wealthy, okay? Because obviously, if you're buying Rolexes, you've got a bit of money. So last year, whenever we went, as we were walking around and being introduced to people and whatever, the amount of people that then, they would say, "Oh, hi, Ryan, nice to meet you." And that was Ryan Constable. This is his wife, Kim. "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." So you'd inevitably be chatting. The guy would say to Ryan, "So what is it that you do?" And I'd say, "Oh, well, I'm in a rugby agency or whatever." And they'd be like, "Oh, right, that's great. That's fantastic." But basically what they're asking is, how come you guys can afford to be here, right?
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, Ryan does well financially by normal standards, but he's not earning what I'm earning. Like, my company's turned over 20 million in the last 4 years. And I'm like the only person who owns it. So so I would stand there and I would wait to be asked, "Oh, and what is it that you do, Kim?"
Yeah.
Nobody ever asks.
Yep.
No one ever asks. And so I remember last year thinking it was, being a bit like, I wasn't even, I wouldn't even go so far as to say I was offended. It was slightly like, "Oh, wasn't that interesting?" And so it happened again this year. And so we went to the Rolex Dinner last November, and the same thing happened again. We were at a table, and at the table, almost every single man asked, "Oh, so what is it that you do, Ryan?" Not one person asked what I do, until the woman beside me then said, "Oh, you look like you're in great shape. What is it that you do?"
And
So
you're
I
like,
said, "Oh, I
funny
own
you
an
ask.
online company." And so then I told her about the company, whatever. So then she said to her husband, "Oh my goodness, you know that Kim does this." And so then, of course, the word started to go around the table, and people were asking, "Oh, you do this, whatever." And so then they began to realize, "Oh, Kim does quite well for herself." But it was funny how then they all kind of were like, "Oh," and the narrative changed. And so then the men but they don't quite know how to talk. They don't quite know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
The women are a bit like, "Oh, that's really nice." And the men don't know how to talk to you because you're not a man.
Yeah.
And so it becomes weird. But I guess back to your question, did it bother me? It used to bother me until I am now so established in my business and in myself and in my
Relationship.
my relationship and the effort that I put into the world and what I've earned, I guess, because I know that I have earned everything that I have earned through blood, sweat, and tears. Now, whenever we go to an event and someone says to Ryan, "Oh, what is it that you do?" And Ryan gets his little 5 minutes of shining glory to tell him what he does, and they all assume that our lifestyle is because of him. Genuinely, I just smile. And I think that comes from, I think that you probably have it as well. And I can even imagine you would have it in the bodybuilding world, where you might say be with Roger out somewhere and they're like, "Oh, you're a professional rugby player. Wow, that's amazing. That must be whatever." And you're standing there, former Miss Bikini Olympia, have traveled the world, speaking at fitness conferences and run your own fitness business, and are arguably more successful than Roger in the world of sports. And you probably don't feel the urge to go, "Well, hang on a wee second, what about me?" Because you're so comfortable in what you've achieved.
That's
you
true.
don't really need anyone to pat you on the back for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens whenever you become so comfortable with what you've achieved. You don't really need anybody to tell you well done, because it feels so solid inside. And I think that's where I've got to now. So it doesn't bother me. And so I always say to women who ask me that question, I just say, when you've made it, when you've really made it, you won't need anyone to recognize you, because the recognition you'll give yourself will be all that matters. And that's where I reach now.
And I think that also, even within, not to talk so much about Northern Ireland. And again, I just want to make it very clear. I love that place. The best friends that I have in my life are still in Northern Ireland. And I've moved out of there 5 years ago, and I still talk to them every single day. And Kim being one of the very good friends that I have. I don't talk to her every single day because she doesn't have time for it.
But we don't need to be friends either.
Yeah. But I know that she's somebody who's always going to be there if shit hits the fan for me, and she will reply. Like she has in more than one occasion, be that business related or personally related. So you have gone against the grain with the society side of things. And one thing that I noticed as well is that in the rugby community, because I was, a rugby wife, is that a lot of the women stay home.
Yeah, they do.
The majority of them, and again, be that like they have their reasons, and it's not for me to question what is best for other people's family. And what I also saw is that you would have incredibly successful women, pre-marriage, pre-kids, that would completely give away their careers to care for and kind of go back to what I perceive, that's my perception, to square one. Because although having my kids and caring for them is very fulfilling, I don't feel like it's the whole of me. And I think you're very much in line with that. And that was something that was challenging even for me and Roger as well, because most of the women in his family are stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, it's very, very cultural. I think in Ireland in general, it's very cultural, but certainly in Northern Ireland, it's, yeah.
And sometimes it felt a bit,
Judgmental.
obviously not judgmental, but sometimes it felt a bit disconnected with even conversations. I wanted to talk about funnels and email sequence and, what is your conversion rate? And you know what I mean? And,
Yes.
like, so you're going to the gym. Also, you're waking up at 4:30. Oh shit. So maybe that's what I need to do too. So like that next level. And again, I am not shading stay-at-home moms, because I do believe that there are a lot of stay-at-home moms who are very driven and they're just waiting for that breakthrough like you did. But I felt the hunger for that kind of conversation that I didn't have. So how do you keep yourself motivated when your environment is different from where you're going?
Different from where you're living and your peers. I guess my work friends became my best friends, if you like. Like I have a couple of people who work for me. Vanessa is one of them, who I know who's my director of marketing. Vanessa has been with me since day one. She was like one of the first people I ever hired. And Vanessa and I would talk funnels and, and conversion rates and email marketing and that kind of stuff. And I think that your conversation changes whenever you're building something. I think that whenever I was a stay-at-home mom and I wasn't working at all, it was all to do with diapers and, and how often they slept or ate or fed. And I think that whatever you're focused on at that time becomes your conversation. It was hard for me to find people to connect with, which is why whenever you started your online business, I was like, yay, another one. Another one.
Like, let's talk funnels.
Yeah, let's talk funnels. But most women were getting together, with their kids like we were to talk about, other people or schools or whatever. And you and I were like, just be quiet for 10 minutes so we can talk, we can like do this internet strategy or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that it is hard. But listen, everything worth doing is hard. It's a lonely old life. Like how many times were you on a diet and you went to like a party and they were like, you brought your own food with you and they're like, oh, you're not drinking. Oh, you're not eating. Are you eating? Oh, sure, have some of this. And you're like, no, thank you. I'm fine with my chicken and rice and broccoli.
Yeah.
And this is, and people get uncomfortable whenever you're doing something differently, but you just have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable for anything you want to achieve in this world. It's just so important. But unfortunately, so many people just want to fit in and be comfortable and do what everyone else is doing. But whenever you find the people like you, Nathalia, you like the slayers, the naysayers, I was just, whenever you moved to Northern Ireland and I realized that you'd done what I wanted to do, which in the beginning was bikini competitions, I was like, I'm going to be her friend. I will seek her out and I will find her and I will befriend her.
Yeah. I love it.
It really was. It was, you just have to be voracious about going after people who are like you.
And you know what? Like, I love that what you said, because that is something that I say all the time. The naysayers, like whenever you start to try and get to the next level, the people who you've known from here, like from this level that you are right now, this level of homeostasis and comfort that you're in, whenever you start to climb, whatever that climbing is, it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. It can even be with your fitness. You start to lose the weight or you start to look hotter or whatever it is. Your success is a mirror on that person's face of what they have not accomplished. And that's why they keep on trying to bring you down. And I think that that's where a lot of people miss out on trying to be normal or stay on the status quo.
Yeah, it triggers. I think that definitely change triggers people, especially as you say, if it's something that they've struggled with or even Laura, who works for me, who's the head trainer in my company now. Laura's amazing, but like she came to me about 2 months ago and said, I want to do a photo shoot, because we're starting to promote her a lot in the programs and things. She said, I want to do a photo shoot, get some really good photos. I said, great. So she said, I'm going to do a shred. I'm going to, do a proper show prep. I'll do it with Mark, who's, my trainer. And I was like, go for it. So she's like 8 weeks, I think, into her prep now. And she fucking looks amazing. Like I looked at her today and her face is like starting to get really similar and her delts are out and her abs are out. And we were training the other week and I was looking at her back and I was having like a little moment of like shred jealousy. I was like, Laura actually looks better than me at the minute. And how do I
Yeah.
feel about this? Like, am I okay about this? Like, I came back to the office. I said to her, I was like really having a moment of, am I okay with Laura looking better than me? Because, obviously I'm like the figurehead of the company now. Of course I am, which is why I'm saying it. But it really, I love moments like that, self-awareness, self-reflection moments, because it makes me go, oh, this must be how other people feel. Like whenever I was shredding or I was losing body fat or I was, had veins in my abs or whatever, people who were maybe slightly uncomfortable with their weight or how they look, because I'm back building the muscle that I had lost because I hadn't been training as hard the last few years. Still training every day, just not really beasting it. And I'm back now trying to build the muscle up again. So I've, with that comes a little extra body fat. So I'm certainly not overweight, but I'm definitely not shredded. And so every time like I see someone, now whenever, I see someone's Instagram, even yours, and I see like the lines of the sides of your abs and I look at Laura and her beautiful delts, it does make me feel slightly, I want to say slightly uncomfortable, but I'm aware of it, if you know what I mean. And it's good. But I think that if you're not aware of those things, you will blame the other person for being who they are rather than looking at why it makes you uncomfortable. And I know that I could shred like that. I know that I could, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm not, going to do this build anymore. I'm going to shred, but I'm not, because I'm on a goal and but I do recognize that it does make me uncomfortable. And that's what happens with other people when you start to change.
And I just want to add something for somebody who doesn't know you personally, might think like, oh, she's talking about being jealous. I can tell you right now that Kim will never be the person. She will always be the woman who is going to come and fix your crown instead of telling everybody around you that your crown is crooked.
Always.
Always. And I can say this with a level of certainty because I have experienced that. So I just want to put that out there. Kim, last question, so because sweet. I know that, and I want to be respectful of your time because
no, it's good. I'm enjoying this.
Not a lot of it. I know that in recent times, whenever you created your company, you was Sculpted Vegan and you didn't think much of it. You was just a catchy name. And then you are one of the few vegans / plant-based who laughs at vegan jokes, which I love because I will send memes to you sometimes and you laugh with me instead of getting all angry and shit.
So I send them to other people. Let me tell you, it's so bad.
I love it. So, and in recent times, you've had a significant backlash from the vegan community because you are not your typical what someone should believe as vegan. Because you ride horses, I'm
not perfect, Nathalia.
Yeah, I know. God, imagine that. You have a dog.
Haunts me every day. Me every day.
Okay,
my lack of perfection.
I have to tell. She has 4 chickens. It's Pam, Sandra.
I actually only have 3 now.
3, okay.
Pam, Sandra, and Ruby. The rest of them are all eaten by foxes. I'm a terrible vegan.
Okay, so Pam she's your bestie because she's always on the Instagram. So. Which I find hilarious that she kind of funny. She answers when you call. Anyway, Pam is a hero. She's a legend. Can you talk a little bit about the backlash that you got, how you have been navigating that? Because it almost became, with fame comes some things that people are not aware of that sometimes can even feel unsafe. And I think that that's kind of where we got. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the vegans, in the beginning, I was shocked by it because I'm such a non-judgmental person. And if I see something on Instagram or Facebook that I don't agree with, I tend just to go, oh, interesting. I don't agree with that, and scroll on.
Yeah.
So I would never take the time to punish someone for something that they believe, which is contrary to what I believe. It's just not who I am. And so whenever it started to happen to me, I was really shocked. I was really like, whenever I started to get the hate, like they were like, vegans don't ride horses and you're carrying Louis Vuitton. And then I realized, oh shit, I'm not actually vegan apparently there's lots of different types of vegan. There's ethical vegan and then there's something else. I don't know, the vegans have lots of different definitions for them. So I realized that I was actually plant-based, which means I don't eat animals, but I will wear leather and I will wear wool and I do ride horses and keep chickens. And sometimes I even eat their eggs. People ask me this all the time. They're like, do you eat your own chicken's eggs? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but you're supposed to be vegan. I'm like, yeah, but like vegan is like about not harming animals. My chickens happily lay their fucking eggs in their coop. Like, I don't understand how that. So this is where people really just don't they just don't understand, they just don't have but anyway, so I started to get the hate online, but it actually started to get really bad. But I would always call them out, right? So anytime that anyone hate came to me, I just came back and I was, and I people say, kill them with kindness. I'm like, fuck that. I never killed them with kindness. The last thing I want to do is kill them with kindness. I'm like, I held them accountable and was like, really? This is not an airport. You don't need to announce your departure. You can just go. You don't need to fucking leave me a nasty message. You can just go. But anyway, so I never killed them with kindness. I always held them accountable. I always replied. Sometimes I even got into full on arguments with them until I caught myself on and realized I was arguing with a stranger on the internet, which really wasn't productive. But so that kind of stopped. But then what happened recently was they started coming after my business. They actually started, I had to do a whole change in the business. I had to change the name of my Instagram to Kim Constable Official and write plant-based founder of the Sculpted Vegan, because the company is so big now. The Sculpted Vegan is so big. They started reporting my Facebook page. They started reporting my ads. They reported my content. They just went on a rampage reporting everything. We had our page shut down. We had my ad account shut down.
I didn't know that.
This was only in the last 2 months. We've had the page shut down twice. We've had our ad account shut down. Now, we've managed to get it all reinstated because we have some pretty high up friends in Facebook. So
and
if
you're
you ever
not
have
doing
any
anything
Facebook problems,
wrong,
let me know.
But that's the thing, you're not doing anything wrong.
But they hate me for not being, because obviously all my Instagram posts used to go across to my Facebook business page. And so they would have been me carrying Louis Vuitton or Chanel or me riding my horse or whatever. And so that what happened is they used to see the Facebook ads. Then they used to go, oh, what's this? Sculpted Vegan. They used to go to the page. They used to see things that weren't vegan and then get really, really, really angry. So they would leave an angry comment or message. We would respond back and say, sorry, you're angry. You can simply move on, which they didn't like. And so therefore, then they started reporting us. So then they reported me to the financial services for money laundering.
Oh my God.
I had I had a massive investigation for money laundering, which of course it was all cleared. They reported me to American Express. I had my American Express cards shut down. The entire business came to a standstill. They have now gone on a rampage. They've reported me to the Advertising Standards Authority. They've reported people I work with to the Environmental Health Agency. You have no idea,
Didn't they call
Nathalia.
you CPA on Child Protection Services? CPS?
Yes, they called the Child Protection Agency, said I was abusing my children. We had investigations. They started reporting my daughter's Instagram account and saying that it was being mismanaged and she was being solicited by men sexually online. We had an investigation by the police on that. It's insane what they've done to try to tear me down. But we've just come back stronger. We've really just come back stronger. Every problem you have like that really makes you tighten everything up in your business. So we are tight, with our systems, which is really good. But yeah, the hate became so bad. But what you have to remember is that if you're not doing anything worth talking about, people won't talk about you. And so the bigger you get, the more these problems are going to arise. And so that's just one thing I've accepted. The bigger I get, the more issues I have, the more hate comes at me. And if you allow that to stop you, you'll never get any bigger. You just have to accept it as part of growth. As part of the process. You can't have the adulation and the good comments without the bad. You can't have one without the other. And one thing I always say to people is, they say, but how do you not let it affect you? I'm like, but if you actually place any importance on those bad comments, if you can't believe the good stuff they say about you, because you can't believe the bad stuff they say about you.
Yeah.
Because both of it is just opinion. If someone's saying to you, Kim, you've changed my life, whatever, I haven't really. All I've done is write a program, get someone to design it, and they followed it. I can't believe that I've actually changed someone's life if I'm not willing to believe that I've hurt someone. So you have to see both of it as the good and the bad, as it's just content. It's just people's opinions, and it really doesn't mean anything about me. And when you look at both sides of it, the negative and the positive, and you separate yourself emotionally from it, you realize it's just part of growing the business.
I do find it very hard to remove myself on a personal level. And I know you are as well, but I'm so passionate about what we do and giving the people the tools to change lives that I think it's pretty impressive that you have been able to separate that. So, and the funny thing is that all these people who are doing all those things, it's kind of like whenever you read a message, there was a guy yesterday telling me that my nose is horrible. And I'm like,
I saw that on your Instagram. I was
hilarious. I'm like, oh my God, you're so ugly. And then you click on the page and you're want to respond and you're like, never mind, life has already responded for me. And that's not to be mean, but if you don't live in this perfect house of like perfection.
Yeah, no, and nobody does. It's just the people, honestly, I always say that, it is true. Hurt people hurt people. The more someone is hurting and dissatisfied with their life and the less joy they feel every day in their lives, the more they want to hurt other people. Like whenever you're in a really happy state and you're really joyful and things are going so well and maybe something amazing just happened in your life and you just made the biggest sale of the year or whatever, and even if something bad happens you can't respond negatively to it. You're just so happy, or your kids are
Yeah.
being little shits and normally that would annoy the crap out of you, but you're just like tickle them and mommy's
Yeah.
home because you're
Yeah.
in such a good mood. So when you're in a good state, things like that don't bother you. So that's the way I always look at people who leave hateful comments. I'm like, imagine how they must feel every day to just want to hurt people. And the perfect vegans, I'm just like, listen, if you want to be a perfect vegan, you rock on, but I never pretended to be. So, but I think that people who want to punish me for not being a perfect vegan, it's really just because people want a role model, Nathalia. They want someone who's perfect to look up to because they're not okay with their own inadequacies and their own insecurities. And so I'm at peace with my inadequacies. I'm at peace with all the shit that is not good about me, as just as I'm at peace with all the stuff that is.
Yeah.
And but whenever you're not at peace with it, whenever you haven't made peace with the dark side of yourself, and you see Kim Constable, the Sculpted Vegan, and you're like, oh, this is now my role model, and then you see her riding a horse, you're like, no, you're not my role model anymore. You've disappointed me. I'm like, well, sweetheart, I never tried to not disappoint you, or impress you. So if you've decided now I've disappointed you, I'm afraid it's on you. Just like setting me up as your role model was also on you. It was really nothing to do with me. So I just genuinely have learned to separate myself from it.
I love that. I love that. Kim, thank you so, like, honestly, this has been such an incredible conversation. All the listeners are going to get a lot of value from all the nuggets that you have said, because I really think that the mindset in which you operate is next level. And I think that that's exactly why you are where you are today. And just to add, like, I've known you for a long time and I have never, ever once heard you speak ill of anybody, ever.
I'm trying to think, have I? No, you're right. I probably haven't.
No, you have
Nathalia,
never.
You're so lovely. Thank you.
And I think that that's like, you're so busy worrying about yourself and how you can make you better and your family better and those around you better, feel better, that you literally do not have the time to worry about what other people are doing. And I think that that's why things work so well for you, because you're always showing gratitude.
Can I say, just in return, Nathalia, I don't think I've ever heard you speak ill of anyone either. And certainly we've had conversations with data, like, do you experience this person in this way? Do you experience this person in a way? This is, is this data consistent with what I'm seeing? But never, where do you hear what I heard about such and such, or this person said or did, or we just don't have time for that shit. It's
and I think that people are so brave on behind a screen, like anything, like, and I know that I can say this about you, but anything that I say behind a computer, you better believe that it can be, I would say the exact same thing if I were in your face.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where there is a lot of people are like, oh, you're just so rude. And I'm like, no, I'm honest.
I'm direct.
And people are so oblivious to all the bullshit and smoking screen out there that whenever you are honest and you're direct, people are like, oh my, you're so rude. That's not being rude.
There's a quote that I love by, if I can remember his name, it's a book called Brad Blanton, Radical Honesty. And he says, it's a great book. I love it. He says, people may not like what you have to say, but they will respect the fact that you're not afraid to say it. And I would much rather be liked than respected. Much rather be respected than liked. Oh my God, I totally butchered that. But you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me. It's like, they may not like what I have to say, but they will respect me and say, well, at least you know where you stand with her. At least you know she's going to tell you direct to your face and she's not going to talk behind your back. And they would much rather that than agree with everything that you say, I think.
And it's funny because, we're just going to keep on going. Whenever I met you, the things that you were talking about, I had heard the whispers, but I'm like, I am not going to I trust my judgment enough to know if a person is a good person or not.
Sure.
And then I met you and I'm like, she's the shit. In any room that I walked in, and if somebody, they never sat around me because they knew I was your friend. But
I remember two people did, and you came and told me, and I confronted them.
Yeah, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to allow anybody to speak ill because they don't even know her. I know her, and I know she's a solid woman. So,
Right.
and I know that you would do the same thing for me. So I'm very
100%.
grateful for your friendship. I'm very grateful for your mentorship, for you believing in me when I didn't even know that I was capable of doing it with 2 kids. And you're like, cute, I have 4. I'm like, that. Where can people find you, Kim, and hear all about Pam, Sandra, and the other one is a bit shy?
And Pam, Sandra, and Ruby here. Let me tell you a really quick story about the chickens before we go. So whenever we got our first 5 chickens, we decided to name them after the grandmothers in the family.
Oh,
so we named them.
Stop it.
Yeah, no, wait till you hear it's worse, right? Pam is after my mum. Sandra is Ryan's mum. And then we had, I had a step granny called Myrtle. And then my real granny, I had 2 real grannies, my mum's mum and my dad's mum, called Gladys and Ina. And so those were our first 5 chickens that we got. And then, so the 3 of the chickens were picked off by foxes. We finally have the whole garden fenced in now, but they were picked off by foxes and they died in order that the grandmothers died.
Holy shit, that's some creepy
So
stuff.
I know. So Gladys died first, and then Myrtle died, and then Ina died. And that was in order that the 3 grandmothers had died. And so my mum and Ryan's mum are now fucking petrified. It's like a game of roulette with the chickens because they're like... Because then we got 2 more. We got 2 more chickens, and then another one of them was picked off. And I said to my mum the other week, I was like, "Oh, one of the chickens died." And every time I said, my mum goes, "Oh, which one? Which one?" And I'm like, "No, it's okay. Pam's safe. It's not Pam." And now I'm terrified as to which fucking chicken's going to die because mum is convinced that when that chicken snuffs it, she's next. She has it literally made up in her head that if Pam ever dies, she's gone. So here's a tip for anyone who gets chickens, right? Never fucking name them after living relatives because it will cause so much anxiety. You have no fucking idea. I honestly, genuinely sometimes think, should I just take these chickens and have them put to sleep? Because then it won't be like, because my mom is convinced and Ryan's mom is convinced that whichever chicken goes next, they're gone. Like they're dead.
Oh my
So anyway,
God.
that's the thing about the chickens. So anyone who wants to see more about the chickens can go to my Instagram. If anyone who wants to write to me, I respond to all my messages. It's just at The Sculpted Vegan is where you can find me on Instagram. And of course, my website's thesculptedvegan.com. But where you'll find me personally hanging out every day is on Instagram. And that's the best place to go find me.
Okay, so your Instagram now, it's still The Sculpted Vegan.
Yeah,
okay.
The handle. I didn't change the handle because it would have wrecked all the backlinks. So yeah, The Sculpted Vegan is the best place to find me. And if you're into horses, you can look up Sculpted Vegan Horses and we post every day there as well.
Okay, I think it's hilarious that she'll like literally go from a boardroom and then next thing you know, she's like fixing a truck. And I'm like, wait.
Yeah, I'm driving. I have like
wait.
I have an 18-ton like truck horse lorry that I'm like honestly in the morning, like I train in the morning and then I come to the office and have meetings. Then I go to the yard and ride my horses or drive them in a truck somewhere. And then I come back to the office, have another meeting. Then I drive one of my kids to Lisburn to train. And then I'm like back to the house to have a meeting. Then I'm back to the office. Like my life is crazy in terms of all of the different balls that I juggle, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it.
Keeps me out of trouble.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kim. Give a hug and the kids for me because I can't believe her son is like an awesome DJ Jack, by the way. And tell Ryan I said hello.
I will, and same to you with Nico and Chloe and Roger. Honestly, I love following you on Instagram. I love seeing your antics and your new dog. What's your dog's name?
Rio.
Oh,
Rio's
love
a trip.
Rio, who's never allowed on the beds or on the couch.
He sleeps on the bed every night, FYI.
Yeah. So Nathalia, thank you so much for having me and all of the wonderful things you've said about me. Like I just want to tell you in return, I'm so appreciative of your friendship and how we've kind of grown congruently over the years in our internet companies. And you are someone who I know that if I ever needed anything, I know I could just pick up the phone and call you. And I think that is the mark of a true friend is we don't need to speak every day. We don't even need to speak every month.
Yeah.
But the minute I message you or you message me, like even if it's just hey, have a question. Have you ever done this course? Or what do you do about this lead magnet? Or anything to do with husbands or kids or marriage? Like we just know that we're there for each other. And I think that is the mark of a true friend. So I just want to say thank you for that as well. 100%.
Thank you so much, Kim.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment or voice message at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on Instagram and let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. As for today, this is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.